Good morning, Eastpoint. Thank you for joining us today. I hope you can worship with us and enjoy our service today.
Waited for this day, we're gathered in your name, calling out to you. Your glory like a fire, awakening desire, burn our hearts with truth. You're the reason we're here. You're the reason we're singing. Open up the heavens, we wanna see you. Open up the floodgates, a mighty river flowing from your heart, filling every part of our praise. Your presence in this place, your glory on our face. We're looking to the sky, descending like a cloud. You're standing with us now. Lord, unveil our eyes. You're the reason we're here. You're the reason we're singing. Open up the heavens, we wanna see you. Open up the floodgates, a mighty river flowing from your heart, filling every part of our praise. Open up the heavens, we wanna see you. Open up the floodgates, a mighty river flowing from your heart, filling every part of our praise. Show us your glory. Show us your power. Show us your glory, Lord. Show us your glory. Show us your power. Show us your glory, Lord. Open up the heavens, we wanna see you. Open up the floodgates, a mighty river flowing from your heart, filling every part of our praise. Open up the heavens, we wanna see you. Open up the floodgates, a mighty river flowing from your heart, filling every part of our praise.
I've searched the world, and it couldn't fill me. Man's empty praise, treasures they fill, are never enough. Then you came along and brought me back together. every desire is now satisfied here in your love. Oh, there's nothing better than you. There's nothing better than you. There's nothing, nothing is better than you. I'm not afraid to show you my weakness, the failures and flaws. Lord, you've seen it all, and you still call me friend. 'Cause the God of the mountain is the God of the valley. There's not a place your mercy and grace won't find me again. Oh, there's nothing better than you. There's nothing better than you, Lord. There's nothing, nothing is better than you. Oh, there's nothing better than you. There's nothing better than you, Lord. There's nothing, nothing is better than you. You turn mourning to dancing. You give beauty for ashes. You turn shame into glory. You're the only one who can. You turn graves into gardens. You turn bones into armies. You turn seas into highways. You're the only one who can. There's nothing better than you. There's nothing better than you, Lord. There's nothing, nothing is better than you. There's nothing better than you. There's nothing better than you, Lord. There's nothing, nothing is better than you. You turn mourning to dancing. You give beauty for ashes. You turn shame into glory. You're the only one who can. You turn graves into gardens. You turn bones into armies. You hearts will cry, these bones will sing. Great are you, Lord. All the earth will shout your praise. Our hearts will cry, these bones will sing. Great are you, Lord. All the earth will shout your praise. Our hearts will cry, these bones will sing. Great are you, Lord. It's your breath in our lungs, so we pour out our praise, pour out our praise. It's your breath in our lungs, so we pour out our praise to you, Lord. It's your breath in our lungs, so we pour out our praise, pour out our praise. It's your breath in our lungs, so we pour out our praise to the head that once was crowned with thorns is crowned with glory now. The Savior knelt to wash our feet. Now at his feet we bow. The one who wore our sin and shame, now robed in majesty. The radiance of perfect love now shines for all to see. Your name is victory. All praise will rise to Christ our King. Your name is victory. All praise will rise to Christ resurrected me.
By your Spirit I will rise from the ashes of defeat. The resurrected King is resurrecting me. In your name I come alive to declare your victory. The resurrected King is resurrecting me. By your Spirit I will rise from the ashes of defeat. The resurrected King is resurrecting me. In your name I come alive to declare your victory. The resurrected King is resurrecting me.
The tomb where soldiers watched in vain was borrowed for 3 days. His body there would not remain. Our God has robbed the grave. Our God has robbed the grave. It's victory. Your grace
All right. Ooh, good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us today, both here in person and online. We're glad that you're all here with us today. Um, we've got doing a break dance in front of the camera here. But we're glad you're here with us today. If you haven't yet signed up for our text service, you text Eastpoint to 94000 and all of the great things that are happening. We'll get reminders, we'll get updates. We've had a lot of stuff going on this week, so a couple of reminders and out. Hello. The signal, the antennas. We're in a modified day, so if I'm in and out, I apologize. Before we get to the couple announcements, why don't we go ahead and can do so. I don't know if the basket's in here somewhere. If it's not, you can give online at eastpoint.org/give. You can also mail a check here to the church. Pockets. We pray. I don't know. Let's just keep on going. All right, I'll just for the service and the offering. And God, we just praise you for who you are, and we're just grateful to be here, God, today with you. We know that it doesn't matter whether we're indoors or we're outdoors, God, that you say where 2 or 3 are gathered, you are there in our midst, God. And we know you're here today. We felt you during worship. We ask right now that you would please bless today's offering, multiply the funds that are given, help them to support and apply to all the ministries here at Eastpoint, God, and the work we're doing here. And we're just grateful for the progress that has been made. And just thank you and love you. In your name we pray. Amen. Just a couple of things. I want to say thank you to all the guys who came out to the men's miniature golf championship yesterday. It was a lot of fun. We had a good time, good weather, and the top 2 scorers, or the top lowest scorers, were my dad, Jim, and then Dave. They tied at a 45, so that was pretty impressive, you know. And then I think I have the top team was the top team was my dad, Aaron and Bill. So they were by far the winners. We had teams, and it was a good time. Everyone had a blast, and so we'll be doing that again, I think, at some future or something like that. And then today is the women's fellowship. So, and we've got a great afternoon. I won't be there, but they've got a great afternoon planned. If you're going to that, Elaine is going to be the leader of the drivers, so you can follow her. She has a purple Jeep. So if you don't know where you're going, follow Elaine right after the service. You there. It's 115 Citation Court, right, in Bear, Delaware. So it's going to be a lot of fun. And then upcoming at the end of the month, I guess that's next Sunday already. I feel like August has just disappeared. So next week we'll have our communion service, which we do once a month. It'll be a great time of worship and communion with God. And then I'm really excited for the 12th of September. We're doing our worship service again. So we'll have music, we'll have time for sharing, and then we'll have a potluck afterwards. So there will be a sign up here. If it's not today, it'll be out next week. So you can sign up to bring a food item to share. And then looking forward to that. I'm almost done now. Yeah. All right. No? I feel like I'm at a press conference. So I think that was it. So with all that, JD.
All right, is mine working fine? You can hear me. I am less sketchy than Josh, so it should be okay. So let me put this out of the way here a little bit. He mentioned how Jim and Dave had the lowest scores. They were the winners of the whole thing. Well, Dave was on my team, and he tied for the lowest score. My team came in last place. So you do the math, It's like, so I told him that Dave should have won a back brace for having to carry us other team members. After carrying us through those rounds, he was rather sore. But but fun was had by all. And even though Josh tried to distract all of us by wearing shoes that would blind you, you couldn't, try to look down and see something. His shoes are just sort of glowing, and he brought his own putter. So I thought there should have been a 10-stroke penalty for having your own putter with you. But we had a good time. I'm sure you ladies will have a good time. I'm eager to find out how you crochet food. So that will be, that's a skill I think would be awesome to have. Maybe doing some linguine or something, I don't know. But I'm sure you guys will have a great time. And if I know a get-together of ladies, there will be a little crocheting and a whole lot of talking. So that's which is good, though. That's what we want, right? That's why you go. It's for the fellowship. So you want to do that. Last week we had a boy band. As Elaine informed me today, we had a garage band. So, it's like, I can't wait for next week to find out what's going on here. We're going to have a rubber band. I don't know, but, dad jokes. Yeah. So, yeah. All right. Well, we've been talking about spiritual disciplines. That word that we don't like, that discipline word. But it's been hopefully something that has been enjoyed because we're looking at what the path to joy. And today, since you don't see the slide, I will just be the slide for you. That today's topic is just called "Be Still," excuse me, and rest. The cough is not part of the title; it's just "Be Still and Rest." But as I was getting ready for this, because I'm thinking about it, because this is a week. Because I was originally going to make these 2 separate weeks, but with what I've got going on ahead, as I was planning out, I've got the messages for the rest of the year plotted out, and so as I did that, I thought, I don't have time to fit in an extra week on the rest one. Because the be still, which is under the category of what I call silence and solitude, this is actually something that I do fairly well. The rest is under a category that I do very poorly. And so I've got these here together for a mixed bag, and we'll see where you fall with these things, because some people are very good at this, some people are very poor at this. As a rule, us Westerners are very poor at most of this, because we're not good for this, because I'm starting, Psalm 46 basically says, "Be still and know that I am God." He doesn't say, hey, crank it up and get to know I'm God. He doesn't say, go out there and do a lot of things, because that's how you'll know me. He says, be still. And this word that he uses for being still is used a number of places in Scripture. And you know what it often refers to when he's saying be still? It's like saying be quiet. It's kind of a shut up and get to know me. Because the be still, and we see Jesus using this at places. You remember when he said be still to the storm? It was raging around, and he says be still. And it was now actually, since Psalms is written in Hebrew and that passage was written in Greek, it wasn't exactly the same word. But when they translate, when he quotes from the Hebrew in the Greek, he reuses the same word, so we know it's the connected word. But he says, "Be still." And this is something I think that is hard for us at times, to just stop and be still. Now, this was, as you know, because if you're familiar at all with Exodus and the 10 Commandments and things of that nature, where he says, you're going to work for so long, and then you're going to stop. You're going to have a Sabbath. And that's where the rest part comes in, because he says, take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and lowly in heart, and you will find rest in your souls. Rest for your souls. Which I like that idea, the rest for your souls, because the word rest carries with it the way that this word would be, even in English, the way we'd most commonly use it, to rest has the assumption or the implication of support that is there. I rest my iPad on the podium, and it is supported by the podium. When we rest in Jesus, we allow ourselves to be supported by him. And he says he will give us rest for our souls. He will support us in our soul. And so it kind of gives an idea of the rest that's maybe a little different, where you think about just, I sleep at night, I get my rest. Not the same thing. Because he's talking about rest when he's saying, lean on me, lean on me. Now, over the years, over many, many years, I have enjoyed hunting, and I am an outstanding hunter. I'm kind of a pathetic killer. But when it comes to the hunting part, I'm really, really good. I can get out there in the woods, and particularly when I was a young man in my 20s, I would spend entire weekends out in a tree stand. And I would be out there 12, 15 hours a day, in the snow, watching for deer. The deer would stand someplace out of range, because I was hunting with a bow, and they would be laughing at me. Look at that idiot out there freezing, as they would curl up together. I did not shoot a deer until I moved to Delaware. It was actually just about 4 or 5 years ago. It was the first time I actually shot a deer. Hundreds and hundreds of hours in the woods, in the rain, in the snow, in the September heat when you're sitting there drenched under you. They say no deer's coming by because I'm sweating so much. They're smelling me from 2 miles away. But one thing I got out of it, and probably one of the things that kept me going back to the woods, back to the tree stand, is that I would stand there for hours on end without a sound being made. Back then, we didn't have cell phones, so I wasn't calling anybody or playing a game on my cell phone or doing anything else. I stood there and I watched. And I don't know if you've ever been out on a good snowy day, but snowy days are quiet. That snow puts a blanket over everything. And with that quietness, there's a chance to start to hear what's going on inside. And I think he tells us to be still and know that he is God, because he's saying, you can't know me with all the chaos and craziness and activity and noise that your life is filled with. And now we have it in pretty much all of our vehicles. You turn the thing on and automatically your radio starts, whether you've told it to or not. Like modern vehicles, the radio, it just sort of kicks on because it assumes that you don't want any silence in your life. And when it comes to like radio or webcasting or anything like this, they call it dead time. If it's quiet, that's known as dead time, and that's a terrible thing. You don't want any dead time, because once things get quiet, people lose interest. They're going to go away. Uh-oh, it's quiet. Let me switch to another channel. Let me change the station. And God's saying quite the opposite. He says, tune in to the quiet. Get to where it's totally soft outside so it can be loud inside. Because you cannot hear. You can't hear what's going on while you're so busy with all this. Now, for those of us that are introverts, and you wouldn't necessarily know it by my preaching style, but I am an introvert. And so you got one tissue? Oh, you got some there. Okay. I just saw you getting ready to wipe that on your pants, and I was a little nervous there. I was having pity for your wife as she's looking at it going, I just washed those. But we as we get that, as we start to hear what God has got to say to us, and that's when we hear him, I think, the most, is when we can stop. Now, I will tell you, silence can be a frightening thing. Because what you start to hear a lot of times is stuff that you have been running from for a while. You want to know what you're running from? Take some time and be quiet. Just don't do anything and just be open to hearing whatever happens. And you know what's going to happen at first? Your mind is going to race through every thought, every project, all the things you think you should be doing instead of wasting time being quiet and still. I can't be sitting here doing this. There's so much to be done. And your mind will be filled with that. And it takes a while to get past it. When I was in graduate school, we were given an assignment. Actually, I kind of negotiated for this assignment because there was another longer paper that we were going to be done. I said, listen, why don't we do this thing that instead of, because we were studying Proverbs, I think it might have been Psalms and Proverbs with the course. And I said, why don't you make us write a proverb instead? Because the classmates always looked, because I was constantly negotiating with professors to modify assignments, because basically I wanted to have an easier assignment. I was always trying to, downplay what we actually had to do outside of the classroom. And so he agreed. But the deal is we had to sit silently and watch something for a minimum of an hour, preferably 2 hours, without interacting, without talking, without writing, without doing anything else, until what we were looking at, the wisdom of what was there, came to us. And they would use example, like we would read the proverb. He says, consider the ant, which does not have a master or a supervisor, and yet goes about collecting and doing its duty all the time. And so I'm picturing some wise guy sitting, watching ants, and after a while going, look at this. There's no supervisors on this crew. This is definitely not a union job. Everybody is busy all the time, and they're doing it without anybody telling them to do it. And so he writes down, consider the ant. And so we all sat, and I should have gotten the paper, because to sit silently for like an hour or two was like painful. And that was one of the first points when I realized I'm missing something in my life. I am clouding out God by filling my life with the noise of the world, because there's stuff that takes place. And so I wanted to make a discipline out of it. I wanted to practice this. Lo and behold, church fathers have been practicing this stuff for centuries. I found this new profound thing that has been done for centuries by other people who are just a lot smarter than me. So, I started to look and say, can I be silent? And the silent part is actually easier than you might imagine, because I would always pair it with solitude. So there's nobody there for me to talk to. Because if Judy's there, I can't really be silent for very long. We're famous for getting lost everywhere we travel in the car, because we get to talking, and then it's like 2 states later we realize, oh, we were supposed to make a turn somewhere, weren't we? And I say, being like a state or 2 later, that's happened. So it's we're like, we're in the wrong state. Where are we? So that I'm a talker. You guys know that I'm a talker. But if I'm on my own, I can be very silent, because I've tried talking to myself, but I just don't understand. So I just keep quiet. But I don't rest. I have a hard time resting. And I found out, and actually some of the stuff that I learned as I started getting into this, it was Dallas Willard who kind of set me on. If you're familiar with Dallas Willard, he's an author. Well, he was an author. He's no longer living, so he doesn't write any books anymore. Not that I've seen, at least. So, but he wrote the book, The Spirit of the Disciplines, where he talks about spirit. One of my favorite books on disciplines. Kind of meaty, but an excellent book. But I was at a seminar with him in a setting not much different than this, and he would talk about it. And he told us that, you start out small. He said initially, only try to do like 4 hours of silence and solitude. At which point all of our jaws hit the floor. Like how long? And because after he had mastered doing 4 hours on a regular basis, he upped it to where he does like what now. Then he did it about twice a year for a weekend, 3 days of just silence and solitude, just being by himself and just letting all other things going. And because he was doing silence and solitude, it was a great opportunity to throw in a little bit of fasting, because it made it easier to have solitude if you're fasting, which we'll get into at a later date. So when I started working on it, I discovered that it is possible, but that 4-hour mark, I had to understand why Dallas Willard suggested that, because that was about how long it took me before all the chatter inside my head stopped. Because I can sit there very quietly for a long time, but there's a very rich life going on inside. There's all kinds of things happening, because it just, as part of who I am, there is life commentary happening constantly inside there. You think I'm just staring blankly, but instead I'm imagining your life with all kinds of different scenarios and adding things to it, and there's commentary. So I have to be in solitude as well. I have to get away from things so I can do that. Now, one of the best examples, I think, when we think about this whole idea of solitude and silence and resting, is Elijah, the prophet. See, Elijah had just, as you know, he had this huge mountaintop experience. He had just faced down 450 Baal priests. And he had faced them down. He had sent the message to Jezebel and Ahab, and tell them, this is the God, we're going to do this way. Jezebel didn't show up for the showdown. So after this showdown, after all 450 priests are killed, after this amazing display of fire coming down and consuming his sacrifice. And I mean, he's done miracles. He's raised people from the dead. He has just seen all kinds of things happen. And Ahab runs home to tell his wife what took place. Now, Ahab was the king, and he was a somewhat scary person, but his wife Jezebel, now she was the one that you needed to be worried about. She was a scary lady. And so Jezebel sent a message to Elijah, and she said, hey, may the gods do, to me, and more so, if you don't join those prophets by the end of tomorrow. If you're not dead by the end of tomorrow, I'm just praying that the prophets that the gods will all kill me, because that's how committed I am to making sure you are dead. And so Elijah takes off on a run. Just defeated 450 priests. But Jezebel says, I'm going to get you, and he's running. And that's something that we face. You ever have a mountaintop experience, and when it's over, maybe it's the thing of you go on a vacation, and it's an awesome vacation, not one of those vacations where you can't wait to get home, but one of those vacations where you're like, this was a great vacation. And you come back, and you're like, I got to go to work tomorrow. And there's this letdown. You're coming off the mountaintop, and you find that you're in the valley. And that's where Elijah was. He had just had these amazing experiences, but now he's running. He's afraid. And I think sometimes we miss all that happened when he ran away, because he runs away, and he's got a servant with him. He's got his manservant. I think it was Winston Churchill who said, I do not know how people survive without their manservant, because Winston Churchill couldn't dress himself. He had to have somebody that would dress him. He's an interesting guy, but he's not the topic of the message today. But Elijah, he takes off. He leaves his manservant and says, I'm going to go out further by myself, and goes by himself, totally alone. And he comes to a stream, and he's tired. And he lays down and he sleeps. And he sleeps for a while. And then he's awoken because an angel comes to minister to him, and the birds bring him food, and they bring him food and water, and they say, get up and eat, because you've got more to do. And after he eats, they say, now rest some more. And he goes back to sleep and sleeps for another long period of time. Have you had that kind of weariness where it's like you sleep, you feel like I could not sleep more, and then all of a sudden, I got to go back to bed. I'm so tired. Those of you with COVID, you know that feeling of, I just can't get enough. I can't get enough sleep. I can't rest enough. And so Elijah is doing this. He's doing all kinds of resting, and when he finally gets up from that, he runs away and then goes to a cave where once again he's all by himself. And that's where we have those experiences, the earthquake, the lightning, the fire, all these different things, and he's trying to find God, and he can't find God until there's silence and all is quiet. And it says, then he could hear the still small voice. Do you remember what God said to him in that moment when that voice came? He said, what are you doing here? That's all he said. What are you doing here? So Elijah launches into it. Well, I did a thing, and Jezebel's going to kill me, and I got all this stuff after. All this, he ramps up into this. And then another time period. Wait. Silence. And God comes to him again and says, what are you doing here? What are you doing? And I wonder how many of us, God is saying to us, what are you doing? And we're so busy with all the life stuff that we can't even answer the question right. Because all we do is we throw back all of life's circumstances. And we say, hey, I'm doing pretty good under the circumstances. To which he asks, well, what are you doing under there? Why are you under the circumstances? Let's get on top of that. Let's not let what's going on around us dictate how we live our lives. Let's keep your eyes focused on me so that you can move ahead and that you can know me. Be still and know that I am God. This is a huge, huge statement. Because he says, I am the creator, the one who made it all, the one who designed everything. And I'm saying, hey, settle down, be quiet, and be with me. I think the story too, there's a battle that's taking place where there's a lot of fear. I'm not remembering all the details right now. I believe it was in Kings, but I apologize for not remembering the exact location of this in Scripture. It'll be a good project for you this week. Just go ahead and find what I was talking about. But the army, they're all afraid because they're like, look at this massive army that's coming against us. And they're told, be still. The only thing you have to do is be still and watch me work. It's all you got to do. And you know what? Isn't that the hardest thing? Isn't it the hardest thing to just be still and let God do the work? Especially for, as Westerners, we're that whole, pull yourself up by your own bootstraps, and we got that rugged individualism. We can do it. I can do it. And we make that a high value. I know it's been a high value for me. I was raised in a family where hard work was like a very high priority. And so the harder you worked, the better off you were, and the better. It's like, none of this God helps those who help themselves, which is not in the Bible, incidentally. You can spend all week looking for that. You're not going to find that in the Bible. That's not there. That's our idea, because we want to be able to basically say, you know what, God needs a little helping hand. I can't let him do it by himself, so I've got to get in there, I've got to do for him. Now, I'm not saying God wants us to sit back and do nothing. I think a lot of times the way that God is working is through our skills, the abilities that he gives us, the opportunities, and I think we should be looking for that. But we don't know when those are and what those are unless we take time to be still and to rest in him, to rejuvenate. The term also, like when God was in Exodus giving us the command that it's basically saying you have to have a Sabbath. He said, you can work for 6 days, but then you're going to take a day off. And he says, and you're doing this so your animals can rest and have a break. And so it's like, hey, God cares about our animals. You're doing this so your manservants and your maidservants can be refreshed, which I love that term, that they can be refreshed. And so it's this idea, and it comes back to that rest, that support that God is giving, saying, listen, this isn't just so that I'm making some arbitrary rule. It says, I'm giving you this because I'm telling you how to live the fullest life. I'm telling you the real path to joy is to not be go, go, go all the time, but to rest. And in that, take some time when you are quiet, when you are alone and you don't have distractions, so you can hear my voice, so you can hear what I've got to say to you, because there are things that I want you to know about. There are things I want you to be able to do. There are blessings I would love to pour out on you, because I'm watching you go full tilt in the wrong direction. I had a friend telling a story. It was kind of funny, because remember first night in Wilmington when they had New Year's Eve, they would have that first night. And he was at first night. Went into one of the banking buildings because his son needed to go to the bathroom, so they go into the restroom. And I guess they rested in the restroom. But then they go to come out, and they try the door, and the door's locked. And so they try it again, and they start hitting the door, and they're going, help. They're in there for like 20 minutes until somebody walked in the door that was behind them, and they were trying to get in the janitor's closet. And I think that so often God is watching us pound on the janitor door closet and God, open the door for me. I've got to do this. Why are you not blessing me in this? He says, what do you want out of the closet? Are you planning to mop up the restroom? Why don't you turn around and go out the door that I have made for you to have so that you can be enjoying the first night activities? And I think so often that is me. That is me pounding on the door saying, God, I'm doing this for you. Come on, buddy. Do your part. Open up this door. And he's like, you don't want to go in that door. Why don't you stop, be still, and listen to me so I can show you the door. So I thought, we're talking about this, and I've told you all along from the beginning of this series, I want this to be a practical thing that you will actually use so it's not onerous. So I'm not going to say, hey, you know what, sometime this week take 4 hours of total silence, because I know that none of you will do it. And so I'm not that foolish. And if you did, it would be such a hard process that you would be like, that was just miserable. Okay, I put those 4 hours in, but now I hate JD. So I don't want you to do that, but I'm going to talk about, I thought we should have an action plan, but since we're talking about being still and resting, I'm calling it the non-action plan, because this is the plan to not have activity, okay? Silence, solitude, and rest, what you need to know up front is they take practice. This does not come naturally to us. I mean, unless you're like an introvert, lazy person who just spends all their time lying around. But for the most of us, this does not come natural. We have to practice this. And by the way, lying around with a whatever those things are called now, not Game Boys anymore, but there's some electronic, portable brain that you download yourself into. Okay, so, but what I want you to do this week is try to find a quiet place and time. What's a good time? Because a quiet time is not right before dinner when there's all kinds of activity. A quiet time is not when, normally there's, like everybody's around and people are asking questions. Now, most of us, if you live with other people, you know that a quiet space and time is a rare thing. It's hard to come by. So there's some thought that has to go into it. And just so you know, we're going to start small. And by small, I mean, if you can get away for 10 minutes, do it for 10 minutes. Now, you will probably find in those 10 minutes, your mind never shut down. You never got to where you were just open to receive from God. But that's okay. There is no failure in this process. There's either do it or don't do it. But if you show up, then that's a success. You win. And you might show up, and 90 seconds into your quiet space and time, somebody comes bursting in with questions and demands and things like this, and you're just like, okay, and you find it, and so you got 90 seconds in for the day, but you showed up. So don't take that as a failure. Take it as this, any discipline requires repeated practice. It requires making it a part of a intentional schedule. You don't get good at it. You're not going to go this afternoon, ladies, and come out of there as world-class crocheters. You might learn how the different things work, but it's going to take practice until all your loops start looking uniform and even, until you can start doing the fancy things, till you start putting those little baubles on top of the stuff instead of just straight lines, because it's going to take practice to get good at it. This is no different. You want to get good at silence and solitude. And let me give you one of the reasons why I find this to be such a foundational thing. This is what creates the context for the other disciplines to happen. It is within the context of silence and solitude that we are able to most effectively pray. It's in this context of silence and solitude that we are the most generous. It's in the context of silence and solitude that we are actually able to reach out to God, to hear from Him, to listen to Him. So it is the environment in which all the other ones can flourish. So for those of you gardeners out there, this is the preparing of the soil. Because if you want something good to grow, that's got to be your first concern. But we're going to start small, and you've got to keep it comfortable. You keep it comfortable, and by that I mean a few things. One, the only quiet place you could find was in your closet. You got inside your closet and were squishing down in the corner, and your knees are jammed up against your ears, but you're like, I found a quiet place. Well, that's not going to work. It's not going to last. For some people, you might decide, I have to lie down in order to do this. And there's a very high chance that you will actually fall asleep if you do that. To which I would say, okay, so you fell asleep. I used to feel guilty when I would fall asleep during prayer. A regular event for me was falling asleep during prayer. And it was really embarrassing when I was preaching and I would do that. No. No, that when I'm alone and I'm doing that and I would fall asleep in prayer, until I started to realize, I said, perhaps God's telling me that what I need the most right now is that sleep. It's part of that rest. And He's saying, you know what? I've heard your prayer. I know what you need before you ask it. So we're going to take this opportunity to give you a little rest. Because your type A personality is not really something that I ordained for you to have. This is more of your thing than my thing. So let's have you rest a little bit. So if you fall asleep while doing this, do not be upset with yourself. Don't say, I can't do it. Every time I try, I fall asleep. You know, worst case scenario is you've learned to add a nap to your day, which is not a bad thing. It's not a bad thing. I think in South America, they have it right with the siesta. You know, the whole idea that middle of the day when it's hot, nobody wants to be doing something like that. Let's just all go sleep for 2 hours. I think it's a great idea. We should incorporate that here. But some of you, it's going to be a matter of sitting in a comfortable place. Preferably if you can have like good posture while you're sitting, the whole slump down and, it's like, it is harder to be comfortable over the long haul doing that. I know it doesn't seem like it, but good posture actually is a more comfortable position once you're practiced at it and you can stay there. And just let yourself be quiet and listen. And if you hear nothing, that's okay. Eventually, I think that you will hear from God. And here's my other prediction. And when you first hear from God, you're not going to like what he's saying. Because usually when we can't hear from God, it's because we have an idea of what he's going to be saying, and we don't want to hear it. And we don't let that come up to the conscious level very much. But I find for myself that that's just one of those things that happens because, like a discipline that we aren't even going to be covering in this series, but the whole thing of confession, that's one of those things that will often come up. But just be still. Be still. Do it in small little chunks and see if you can't add it. Even if you only do it, let's say you do it 2 or 3 times this week. It's like, I can't do that every day, JD. That's too much. I don't have 10 minutes a day. Where would I get my Instagram in if I were doing that for 10 minutes a day? How could I be watching TikTok and do that at the same time? It just doesn't work. And you're right. Something has to give. Every time you say yes to something, you have to say no to something else. In fact, you have to say no to a whole bunch of everything else in order to say yes to something. But it comes back to, do you want God to take root in your life and to change the way you think, change the way you see the world, to change who you are, so that your life will be characterized by joy and fulfillment and purpose? And if you want that, then be still and know that he is God. Let's pray. God, we just thank you that you're so patient with us, that you wait for us. And as we were singing earlier, Lord, that even when we screw up, that you are constantly, you're raising us out of the ashes to bring you glory, Lord. How unworthy we so consistently can be, and yet how much you will bless us and use us, Lord. Help us to lean on you, to rest in you, to allow you to bear us up, and that in silence we can know that you are God. In Christ's name, amen. So the ladies have their thing. I have no idea. Oh, pretty close. Pretty good with no clock in here, huh? So ladies got their thing. The guys just going home and resting from their rigorous day of golf. And we will see you all next week. All right? It's been a while since I've done 18 holes.